Welcome to the launch of the International Armenian Literary Alliance. I'm Olivia Katrandjian, and I'm so excited to introduce the many talented writers sharing their work today, to tell you a little bit about what we're planning for the coming year, and to invite you to become a founding member of our organization. In April, submissions are due for the inaugural Young Armenian Poets Awards, an exciting opportunity for high school students to be published in the global magazine HPEM, which Semerdjian will tell you more about. In May, with the Armenian Institute in London, we will celebrate the 15th anniversary of the Armenian Poetry Project, which is run by our board member, Lola Koundakjian. In June, with Hyphen Magazine, we'll be hosting a reading and panel to share and discuss queer Armenian literature. JP Petrossian will talk more about that. In July, our mentorship program will begin, run by Shahe Mankerian. And in the fall, we'll host a reading featuring Armenian women writers. In the past year, I've spoken with many Armenian writers about their experiences to figure out what is most needed to support writers within our community. This organization is the product of those discussions. The board members and I have founded IALA to celebrate Armenian literature written for, by, or about Armenians, to empower diverse identities within our community and to foster intercultural exchange. We have founded IALA because it's something we wish we had supporting us when we were starting out. And we are building what we want to see. Today traditionally marks the first day of spring, and so it's the perfect time to come together to listen to stories from Armenian writers in a reading that I hope marks a new chapter within our community in how we lift each other up. You'll see a link to the program for today's reading in the chat. In the interest of time, I won't give lengthy introductions, but you can learn more about each writer in the program, which includes links to buy their books. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our first reader, Armen Hayastansi.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm going to read an excerpt from my first ever short story of Detailment. It was published in Exchanges. It's Literary Translations Journal from the Iowa Translators Workshop. No one remembers anymore how it came to be that two ones who were next door neighbors fell in love. However, it soon became clear to everyone that they were made for one another. The ones in love had been living independent lives for a long time, each one taken with the other one's feelings. Once the time came, their families took a full account and decided to formalize their children's relationship. They agreed to numerically legalize, or as they say, legally enumerate, or to state it more simply, unite them in marriage because it was the norm in their devotedly numerical world. That's quite enough. Let's go to the main story. One morning, the family of one of the two ones gathered and went to ask for the hand of the other beloved one. I shouldn't forget to mention that the mother of the entreated one, Madame 12, was extremely opposed to any potential marriage. One by one, the numbers in decreasing order got acquainted. The in-laws liked each other immediately. They were all ordinary numbers, modest, one or two numerals without additional expressions or other extras. They sat down, counted, accounted, and formed the initial equation. 1 + 1 = love. Then the father of one of the two, glass in hand, spoke. We've come to ask for the hand of your one. Our one is alone, an only child. For a long time now, our one has loved your one. Why shouldn't we add your one to our one and make our ones a two? Madame 12, sore-faced, who sat impatiently while counting silently to 12, couldn't hold her tongue and abruptly said, What? Addition? That primitive, trivial, crude operation? You think this is the formula for love and familial bliss? That simplistic synthesis? That so-called addition? 1 + 1 is not love, but two. In the end, my child must lose the oneness of our family, our unit of identity, and become two. Now, this is impossible, said one of the one's aunt, an arithmetic teacher, who tried to stop Madame 12's escalating hysteria. Let's try another equation for one's love. For example, 1 × 1 = 1. Let the children not add to each other, but multiply one another. Next, Uncle 21 jumped in. It's wonderful. 1 divided by 1 also equals 1. So if you don't want to lose your identity, multiply and divide to your heart's content. Yes, maybe that's a solution, stammered the father of one of the ones who was trying to make a toast to getting two out of the ones. But after all, everywhere you go, under each underground walkway, on all the walls, on every classroom desk, and in every teenager's notebook, love always adds.
It never multiplies or divides. The equation for love has always been that way. That's how it was in my day too. One would be added to another one, and the result would be love.
My dear, can you imagine how dangerous consummation of their marriage could be? What if one of the horizontal lines of that plus sign disappeared? God forbid, once one gets undressed and Madame 12 could barely restrain her tears. Do you know what would happen if the vertical line of the plus sign was erased, leaving the other line? They'd die. They'd become zeros. 1 minus 1 equals that, equals 0. Is that what you want? I won't allow my one to end up as 0. There's 0 chance I've burdened and raised my child to 0 out because of a careless romantic subtraction. Well, what should we do? I don't understand you at all, Madam 12. You don't want your 1 to become 2. You're afraid that your 1 will be canceled out and become a 0. But on the other hand, you don't offer a solution. I respect you. You're clever, an accomplished number. You divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and yourself without a remainder. But do try to be a little more constructive, said the aunt again solemnly. Then she added the following. Don't you realize this is the 21st century? As she said that, she smiled and sent a playful glance in the direction of Uncle 21. She continued, arithmetic has left its classical forms behind. Let's send our ones to live in another counting system where 1 plus 1 equals 11. It does, after all, happen that way as well.
You mean the world where there are only ones and zeros? In that case, we will never be able to see our children again, said Uncle 13.
Oh, 13, don't open your mouth unless you have something positive to say, Madam 12 admonished. No, that's not what I mean, said the aunt, the arithmetic teacher. Just recently, I've been informed about a system. It's called Odd Center. Odds live there, but no evens, and I guess 1 plus 1 equals 11 there.
Should we send our children into an unknown world where there are no even numbers, where there are only odds? That is sodomy. Who knows what odds we'll get into? How do we know if it's safe there? I don't stand for it. And you're saying this to a mother, knowing full well that I'm an even number myself, said Madame 12. Here, Madame 12 jumped up, divided into 2 6s, each of which divided into 2 3s with the speed of lightning, and I guess I'm out of time. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, International Armenian Literary Alliance. It's an honor and pleasure to be part of this event and community. That's it.
Thank you, Armen. Our next speaker is Aram Mrjoian. Welcome, Aram.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I have to say, I'm extremely humbled to be part of this lineup with so many writers I really admire. So thank you for inviting me. A lot of my work over the past year or two has been focused on climate crisis and thinking about my own role in that. I've been editing an environmental folio around this issue for Pank magazine. And I'm just going to read a short piece of flash nonfiction published in a small journal called Hobart, if you want to find it online. 2 palms full of water to rinse the crust from the corners of my eyes and a quick flush of the toilet. I wonder how much water will never be brought back through these pipes. It never runs out, and so I brush my teeth, wash the dishes, run another load of laundry, and dig ice from the freezer for my jar of coffee. My phone has been plugged in all night, even though it alerts me that it was fully charged hours ago. I flip on lamps, stare into the chasm of the glowing refrigerator. I awoke no more than 10 minutes ago, and already so much has been consumed. I drive to the gym in clothes I will funk up with sweat so that they can only be worn once before finding a place atop the bulging hamper. When I'm finished with each machine, I discard a wet wipe to clean away the marks of my body. The sun isn't up yet. What constitutes a day? Is it wasteful if it's served its purpose? Is it wasteful if it's not wasted? The gym shower is steamy, flowing, always ready for my malodorous form. Later, in my office on campus, I'll realize I forgot silverware again, dig a plastic fork from the middle desk drawer, and toss it licked clean and glistening into the recycling bin after every crumb is scraped from my Tupperware. Another cafe cold brew, another plastic cup and straw that will never be reused. Another slice of pizza, another paper plate gone gray with grease. I know these small pleasures are nothing compared to my weekly run to the grocery store, the utility bills I watch like a hawk, the ghastly paper trail of letters and bank statements and books that arrive each day in the mail. I can't look into a public trash can anymore without wincing. I can't watch a pickup truck drive by without brooding over the aroma of exhaust. I drink enough water to force myself away from my desk often. To the bathroom I go, more flushing away of plentiful water, more rinsing and washing my hands that crack and break as they dry beneath a hot gust of air. Every building is well lit just for me. Every light automatically turns on as I make a commotion entering the room. When I return home, it's another plastic poop bag on the dog's walk, the phone recharging, music erupting from a speaker chained by a cord to the wall. I consume so much. I demand so many conveniences. I crave foods from distant lands. I read under bright light bulbs humming. I let the television talk me down after another stressful day. I seek the microwave's warming buzz. And after brushing my teeth again, after my contact lenses sit in their plastic case full of fluid from the plastic bottle that I pray will not end up in a landfill, after I rinse the gunk from my hair and face and empty my bladder again before bed, flushing another gallon of water away. Are the windows closed? Are the doors locked? Let's seal up this space so that the thermostat sings at a comfortable temperature all night. Let those appliances hold my food icy crisp all night. Let my phone charge all night and glow in this quiet house while I curl up with the dog and my wife for this brief abeyance before I devour more tomorrow. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Aram. Our next speaker is Marina Petrossian. Welcome, Marina.
Hi, I'm a poet. I believe in the power of words. That's why I write poems, and that's why I've written this text that I will read for you. Mainly I write in Armenian, but this text I have written it in English. It's called Let's Build a Bridge. Hi, Alan. I want to build a bridge. You live in New York. I live in Yerevan. I want to build a bridge from Yerevan to New York. And I will try to build it with words, the only building material I have. I want to build a bridge because my heart is sad, because my country is defeated. And though my country is not your country, but maybe some of my dreams are your dreams also. Many years ago, when I first put my feet on the pavements of New York, my heart began to beat like mad. And before I could understand what was going on, I was crying. I was crying of joy. I'm a poet, Alan. You are a poet too. Poets speak to people whom they do not know. When I first put my feet on the pavements of New York, my heart began to beat like mad. Here are the people whom I do not know. Here they are, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And I want to speak to them. I want to speak to them about my dreams. I live in a small country, Alan. I live in a small and poor country. You live in a very big country, Alan. You live in the richest country of the world. Can we have the same dreams? A difficult question to answer. Maybe we can. I'm an Armenian, Alan. You are an Armenian too. What does it mean? Surely it means we have together some glorious and also not at all glorious memories of the past. And what about future? Can we have similar visions about future while living in different countries? A difficult question to answer. Maybe we can. We have to try and see. That is why I want to build a bridge. A bridge from Yerevan to New York. Just as a start, and maybe we will go on to build other bridges too. I do not know you in person, Alan. We have never met. Some years ago, I translated your poems for Iknadossian magazine, and this was our only meeting, a meeting through words. I believe in the power of words. In the beginning was the word. In the beginning, there always are the words, and then all other things happen. I write this letter to you, Alan Semerdjian. But when poets speak, they speak to all people. This is an open letter. This is a small boat sent into the sea with a message for all Armenians living under this sun. Can we build our future together? Now, after the defeat in the Second Artsakh War, people in Armenia are depressed. Most of them are in despair. We have to find ways out of this. We have to find new ways to live together. Poets usually are not rich in money. Their main capital is the freedom. They're free to try. Can we try it together, Alan? Can we build the bridge, Yerevan, New York, Yerevan? We may start and then invite people to join us. We'll invite all those who like bridges, who like Yerevan, who like New York, who like building the future with their own hands. By the way, Yerevan, New York is the name of my last book. Here's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marina, and it's particularly appropriate because Alan Semerdjian is our next reader. He will also say a few words about our Young Armenian Poets Awards, which he's running. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Just, Marina, I would dive into that ocean between us to start building that bridge. I just want you to know that. And yes, we can have the same dreams. I want to say, thank you to the community of writers who've come together to make the International Armenian Literary Alliance a very real thing, and persons who believe that together we are stronger, as evidenced there through that poem, and that service and giving back really matter, and that perhaps more than anything else, the voices of the next generation are at the core of any progressive initiative or movement. So regarding the Young Armenian Poets Awards, which I'm honored to serve as program director for, I just want to just note that we seek to find and provide a platform for our newest voices. The idea is that really there's no overarching theme for the call, only a prerequisite that the writers are between 14 and 18 and that they identify as Armenian. The cultural online organization magazine HPEM will publish the results, and we're excited to work with them and thankful for the judges as well, who are board members and helping out with this process. So in short, I just want to say that if most of the details are at the website, if not all of them. There's a flyer there designed by Steve Alton, who's a great designer as well, and artist. And I'm hoping that we can get this out to all corners of the world, truly, because indeed there's no zip code for exciting or vital work that needs to be read and heard. So I'm really looking forward to this. I just want to read a short poem that I think will be the basis of a future collaboration I'm doing with my partners, Aram Bedikian, guitarist, and Kevork Murad, painter. We're putting some ideas together around this for the Armenian Institute, perhaps early summer, around this poem. It's called Writing About It Again. And it comes with an epigraph here by a great post-World War II writer, German writer, Enrique Boll. The artist carries death with him like a good priest his breviary. I haven't written about it for a while, haven't thought of grandfather and whatever march he avoided when urged onto some line that led him to the orphanages and the oils he used to paint the family stolen from him. I haven't explored the texture of the grafted infants of Diyarbakir, Samsun, Van, places I've never visited still, places indelible, improbable, fixed with the many faces of loss. No, the word is open wide. Too many to count or remember well at this point. So guilt, confusion, and helplessness lap themselves. I know it's not sexy and smells like something old. I know the trendy will mock rotting flesh, but we're approaching the end of over a century inside the counterfeit universe, and new maps cross themselves for light and pack their belongings in the evening, and the children still seek some form and this space to reverse erasure, some pause to the calendar of forgetting. My grandfather, dead now for almost 2 decades away, and I'm documenting his paintings one by one, stacking the buried, unearthing their shapes in code after sorry, indecipherable code. Oh, truth, where is your hide? Why must we seek you again in the debris? When I enter the room with the easel, tens of brushes bunched upright stand stiff with life, so much rich and naked life still poised for what I do not know. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Our next speaker is Gregory Djanikian. Welcome, Gregory.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, reading with you and hearing all your work. I'm going to read 3 poems from my recent book, Sojourners of the In-Between. And the first one is called Music Making. The bells are ringing in their towers. The acorns are dangling by a thread from the wind-tossed trees. Last night, coyotes were yipping to each other across the valley, and this morning, the raucous birds repeated the story in their own versions. Sometimes I don't know whether to applaud or cover my ears or sing along. The refrigerator has clicked and hummed at odd hours of the night, and now my cat is walking over my keyboard, tapping out a blessing I wish I could understand. The world's blips and pings, street traffic, glass clatter, hammer clank, make up, John Cage said once, maybe plunking a clothesline, the irreproducible music of our lives. And I'm adding to it without effort, just one of millions in this musical drift, shoes clacking against the sidewalk, newspapers rustling mid-commute, the office of twang and timbre open for business, and everyone invited. Let a choir of angels join with their open mouths. Let the devil stand among them, pitching his stones into a lake. I've turned over a rock. Even the woodlice are scuttling in the dirt, making as much noise as they can. The world turns on a needle. Everything I've said out loud has bumped into something or other, even as ephemeral as vapor or smoke, causing such small riots of sound, imperceptible changes of direction. Next poem is called Bats, which I'm afraid of, as most people might be, but I find them also in some ways very spiritual. Bats. They are like the body unhinged, the soul made almost visible, a swerving of wings, erratic slicings that keep us awake like narratives that have no certain end, or wavering hands in the fog, nothing distinct except their curve and flit under sky or bow, unbirdlike as they are, unknotting the air with loops and veers, catching our blithe attention. What makes them suddenly leathery and fearsome, passing as they sometimes do into our lives through the smallest apertures, we who are their kin, backboned, cochlear, crouching below them with our gloves and nets, plastic bowls and cookie sheets, all the domesticity we can muster, wishing only that the moonlight might lure them back into a steeper darkness toward everything they are, nocturnal, unfeathery, silhouettes of incongruous motion, momentary, arrhythmic glimpses we endure, keeping our distance. And I'd like to end with a poem called Beauty. In the eye of the beholder, we say, disregarding what the beautiful might spring from, an oil-slick satiny iridescence, the ravishing splash of orange in the smog-ridden sky. Yesterday, someone pointed to the loosestrife overtaking our garden, praised the lovely delicate petals, the long magisterial stalks. Sometimes the beautiful is a fire that takes the whole of a tree in its arms, sometimes a wild and engorged river cutting deeply into the land. The beautiful floats beyond us, immune to our beholding. Once, on a slow train home, it was the 100 refinery towers looming eerily over our passage, flaring like dark angels. Sometimes it touches us without scruple or intention, this arrow's fletching against my fingers, the soft art required to bring down, make war. Sometimes it's almost nothing at all. A long whistle in the distance, a startle of new rain, a woman's delicate hand appearing in a window, then disappearing before any implication. Thank you.
Thank you, Gregory. Thank you. It is my honor to introduce Arlene Avakian. Welcome, Arlene. Arlene, you're on mute.
I was just saying thank you for inviting me to this wonderful gathering, the first of many, as you say, and I'm happy to be on the board. I'm reading two poems which have decades between them. The first poem was published in 96 in David Kricorian's magazine, Fork Roads, for which Noni Hogroyan was the artistic director. It's called Connect. It's actually two short poems. It's called Connections 1. Barely wide enough for the car, the road winds through treeless, grass-covered hills, now mostly empty of people and silent but for the occasional bleating of sheep. Speaking loudly of those who were once here, stone walls enclose long abandoned plots and roofless stone cottages. Walking the bogs, but afraid of getting lost, sitting on the rocks near the blowhole I mistook for thunder, growing to love the strange smell of peat fires, I feel very much the Yank I am called by my neighbors. Yet there is something else, something my assimilated Armenian American mind pushes away. A connection here, in the townland of Falcarab, County Donegal, Ireland, to Armenians in Turkey, excuse me, after the forgotten genocide, to Armenians in the Republic celebrating its 3rd birthday for the first time in history amidst war and privation, and even to Armenian Americans in communities I once fled from and now shun. Thousands dead of unnatural disasters, histories lost, languages strange to ears turned to Europe, now struggling to be reborn in native soil and diaspora. Apostolic Christianity and Catholicism viciously suppressed, define as they ossify. Silence, once necessary, becomes fortification, spawning a way of life based on denial. Holding tightly to what was demonized lest it disappear from the face of the earth, will this grip loosen enough for lungs to expand? Can these histories provide tools for the changes now needed for survival? The dead are grieved, but pain born of denial and silence goes unacknowledged, while it continues the work of the killers. And from that same publication, Connections 2. Staying in the cottage at the end of the road for a 3-week vacation, we are called the Yank Girls by our neighbors, who offer tea and warm buttered soda bread. I am as relaxed as I have ever been, but I dream of lesbians every night. An Irish friend, hearing the growing love for his country in our voices, asks if we would live here. Emphatic and decidedly negative, my response is too quick. I know this maintenance of traditions and have raged against it most of my life. But here, where people are familiar, though not mine, I have seen beyond the bars of conventionality to accept their warmth and make the connections we make. Can this vision translate to my people, the now mostly privileged Armenian Americans who, like Irish Americans pushed out of this land, have taken on their acquired whiteness with a vengeance? Back in New England, it takes days to adjust to the landscape. Trees we have loved now feel claustrophobic in their late August fullness. My nightly dreams are no longer of lesbians, but I crave Ireland. The slides are back, cooking my food again for friends who will come to see where we have been. I leaf through the spattered pages of my Armenian cookbook, looking for something special. Reading the transliterated recipe titles in the words of my first language, I hear my grandmother's voice say the words I now barely understand. I mouth the words and my heart pounds. The second poem is more recent. It was published in 2013 in the European Journal of Women's Studies. And it's after a poem by Mary Oliver called The Visitor. The Ghosts. Did I ever want to get over the barrier between us, to scale the walls of the fortress she constructed to protect what was broken in her? Did I love her as an infant? Did that vulnerable love wither in the desert of her heart? Was it then that I built my own protection, my own fortress that would take me years to recognize and then more years to begin to dismantle? Walls I still chip at. Could we have loved in time? Dangerous musings. Guilt creeps towards me on all fours, whispering, you should have, you should have. Protest grows in my heart. I was an innocent who deserved to be loved, but was outside her fortress walls, damaged and broken, huddled behind my own fortress, outside of hers and alone. But my trauma was not hers, not genocide, not terror of mass murder, nor displacement, nor hunger. I had enough to eat, a secure home, clothes on my back, promise of a future, America. But it was not enough to open the heart closed so young. There would be time, but it would always be too late for love.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you. Our next reader is Raffi Wartanian. Welcome, Raffi.
Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm honored to be among so many inspiring and amazing people and to be present for the launch of this wonderful organization. I want to start with a poem about my dog, Soma. Here's a photo of her. She's a street dog from Yerevan, Armenia. And I used to be afraid of dogs when I was a kid. And she really helped. She was one of the antidotes to get through 2020. It's a short poem. It's in Armenian. So I'm going to read the Armenian. And then I wrote a translation this morning. So here we go. Համով հոդով քեբաբ ուդող, սև եւ ջերմակ քուլբա հակնող, թաթիկ լզող, մազեր թափող, շոյե այս փափուկ փորիկ ունեցող, Ցուգ որսող, սկյուր փնդրող, երազ դեսած հաճողություն ունեցող, բոչիկ շարժող, բարձրացայն հաճող, ձակ փորելեն չի գշտացող, շունիգս. So the translation is the eater of aromatic kebabs, the one who wears black and white socks, she who licks her paws and sheds, pet this one who has a soft belly, fish hunter, squirrel seeker, the dreamer of great fortune, the tail-wagging, uproarious barker who never tires of digging holes, my dog. So, all right. Okay, the next one also in Armenian, so I'll do the Armenian and then I wrote the translation this morning. This poem uses my father's garden as a lens to explore the challenge of maintaining two languages. It was originally published with the Armenian Poetry Project in 2010. Special thanks to Lola Koundakjian for her help with this poem. Haignaha bedin bardezen turs, lezus taghetsi horas bardezin mech, vorbesi ujda penutian, vorvedev hokis lurutenen al husahade. Anhuise vorbes spurk, vorbes inkna odar, vorbes hoki u vga yev aksori zavag. Baderazma yev vohperkutiuna ggochvin ait yeres lezoghnere, u dznochkes irens hajuyke gbahen metzmores kerbanin mech. Yani sabrsız monami, ais gyanke pnagan che, vorovedev angdzaggi gmachkime gogen, ein kerezmanadan mech ur gfrfra hove. Turkio, Hayastani, Abarusastani hove. Amerigai, Chinastani, Uruguay hove. Nahadagnerun hove, Zoherun, Yerkichin, yev Arhestavorin hove. Pernet pırtsvadz lezun îngăghmetsav melanin mech, urgărtsav patmagan nuter kărel. Dzovapin avaznerun văra, tarerun întatskin, darinerov, orerov, mărciunnerov, Türkçe dilinde, en francez, en Arabi. The translation: outside Haig Nahabed's garden, I buried my tongue in my father's garden in order to give sustenance to nature, for my soul is desperate, hopeless, as a diasporan, as a stranger to myself, as a soul and witness and a child of exile. War and tragedy are face lickers, and my parents keep their joy in my grandmother's pocket. This life is unnatural, for it blossoms from a skeleton's ribs in a cemetery where winds swirl. Winds from Turkey and Armenia, Russia's wind, America's, China's, and Uruguay's wind, victims' wind, martyrs' wind, the wind of singers and artisans. I dipped in ink the tongue extracted from my mouth in order to write about historical subjects on a parchment of shoreline over the course of centuries, years, days, ants, in Turkish, in Arabic, and in French. Okay, last poem. This one I wrote in the fall of 2009 while I was living in San Francisco. I'd go to a nearby Starbucks to write, and one time an unhoused man entered and sat next to me. It brought up a lot of feelings, and so I wrote this poem, and it was published in August 2010 with Armenian Poetry Project. And the poem is called Dear Stranger Who is Probably Homeless and has sat next to me for the past 3.5 hours. You think I don't notice you sitting there next to me? I've been here 3.5 hours typing verse, structuring plots, and you have sat there right next to me, staring blankly at nothing with feigned interest. Where did you find those papers in your hand? The FedEx care package you cradle like a newborn, and its accompanying papers that connect you to a body and time and place that I could never surmise, nor trust that it is any more likely authentic than you're digging it up from a trash pile to validate a sense of justification to sit in this bourgeois cafe. And the fact that I think these things about you, that I doubt your belonging here, makes me look at myself with disgust and ask, who am I? When I went to the bathroom, I took everything because I didn't trust you. I only left the cup of water that kept inflating my bladder, forcing me to confront this dilemma. The awkwardness when I returned, we both felt it. My distrust alarmingly apparent. You fidgeted, I know it, and it made me fidget, though I never let on. Why would I think for a second that somehow I belong here more than you do? Because there's more money in my pocket? Because I was born with more opportunity than you? How would this scene play out? Who would we be if the roles were reversed? If I endured your life and you mine? Do I choose to distrust you, or am I programmed to distrust you? Do I choose to obey the programming? Do you? Would you feed me if I was starving in your arms? Would you throw me a penny if I begged for salvation? What is your name? What is your story? Why are you this way? Why am I? Why am I unable to ask you? I hate you, and I love you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raffi. Our next guest is Nancy Agabian, who's also going to speak about how you can become a member of our organization. Nancy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your incredible words today. One way, or an important way to get involved with IALA is to become a member, to tell us about your interests and skills, and to make a financial contribution. We're excited to offer a few levels of membership for whatever people can afford or contribute, which will give you access to all our programs and which will help support and fund our programs. And since it's our inaugural year, we're offering reduced rates along with several free memberships for those who are unemployed or on a low income. So please visit the membership page on our website. There's a survey there to fill out about your skills and your interests that you could contribute, and you can become a part of our community. And we really hope you'll join us. This is your organization. Help us build it from the ground up. I'm going to segue to read my background is I've written a few books in multiple genres on the intersections of being Armenian and queer. I'm currently a caregiver to my elderly parents in Massachusetts, and this is a brief essay I wrote at the start of the pandemic. The title is Grief, April 17th, 2020. My father's frame is taut, bent from the waist, but straining to straighten, and he walks like a toy soldier, one plodding foot in front of the other. I'm watching the news after dinner when he comes to me holding a plastic sleeve of orange cheddar slices. There are 4 slices of cheese missing, he reports. Born in 1929, the son of refugees, he's always been thrifty, saving the rubber bands from vegetables, sucking every fiber of meat from a bone, picking up grains of sugar from the table with a licked finger. I anticipate a complaint about my mother eating too much cheese. Instead, he informs me, it says on the package there are 11 slices, but they only gave us 7. I try to clear up his confusion. It's not a brand new package. But I just opened it. No, you didn't. I opened it last week. We've eaten 4 slices. I made Mom a grilled cheese for lunch. The cheddar's high level of sodium will endanger his heart, so I had made him a sandwich with mozzarella instead. He's unaware of the substitution, just as my grandmother didn't know decades before that he taped shut the holes in her salt shaker. An industrial appraiser, he was always coming up with mechanical solutions. Now the Ziploc seal on the cheese slices has confounded him, the package appearing as new. This is the dance of dementia. Everyday tasks need elaborate explanation till they don't matter. But now it's imperative that he understand. This is why we wash our hands for 20 seconds. This is why old people must stay at home. This is why we didn't wear masks, but now we should. I have trouble understanding it myself. 4 slices are missing, he insists. We have a lawsuit here. The one small part of my brain chuckles. Most of my mind is fatigued. My father encouraged me as a child to write letters to the editor, to speak up against wrongdoing. How can he not understand there are more pressing matters outside our quarantine? There are not enough masks. Tests are scarce. Black and brown people are disproportionately dying. As of today, over 30,000 people have died and roughly 600,000 people have been infected in the US. They are numbers, sterile, appearing on the TV screen. Not 1.5 million, I tell myself. At least they're not as bad as our own private genocide. Close to 200 folks lost their lives in Massachusetts today. The state lists the dead by their age. There are usually a few in their 50s, a bunch in their 80s. Today, there are several 100s. Who are they? Old people who are going to die soon anyway, unable to count their last breaths. Why did you even open this? I asked my father. Are you hungry? I opened it because it says there are 11 slices and they only gave us 7. I listened to his rage, a flag ripping in the wind. Our ability to fathom unimaginable loss, like a few slabs of cheese, missing. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And as Nancy said, we hope that you will become founding members of our organization. There's a link in the chat box if you're interested in signing up. Our next reader is Nancy Kricorian. Welcome, Nancy.
Hi, thank you. I'm going to read a little bit from my novel in progress. This is my 4th novel, and just so you know where we are, the novel has 3 sections. The first one is an Armenian family in New York on 9/11. Then the second section goes back to Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War between 1975 and 1980. And then the final 3rd section goes back to 1915 in Hajan. And this is just a couple of pages from the 9/11 section. And the main character's name is Vera. Her husband's name is George. And this is her a couple days after the attack on the World Trade Center. Vera had repeatedly recounted the story of watching the billowing smoke as they sat on the therapist's couch. She was embarrassed to reveal that she and George were in couples therapy, but with repetition, it had started to sound almost comical. She told it again when her college friend Emily called for the first time after the attacks. Emily, whose painting studio was in the basement of her Brooklyn brownstone, had heard about the first plane over the radio. She had climbed to the roof in time to see the plane slam into the second tower. Emily said it looked like a special effects scene in a disaster movie. I had to get the boys from school. On the drive, I had a full view of the towers. After they collapsed, scraps of paper and ash showered down on the car. And then a finger landed on the windshield. Vera asked, a human finger? Emily said, it looked like a thumb. I can't think about it. I grabbed the boys and headed home. The wind was blowing south and there was so much smoke and dust that it was like driving through fog. Vera said, Jeannie told me the dust is filled with poison. You should have your house tested, especially the roof. Jesus, when I think about the computers, thousands of them and all that jet fuel, Jason is trying to find someone with a HEPA-vac to come clean the place. I can't talk about this anymore. I haven't been able to paint. I can't concentrate on anything for more than 10 minutes. Vera said, it's like some horrible slideshow in my head. Sometimes one of them gets jammed and it haunts me all day. After they hung up, Vera thought about the finger on the windshield. Now she had another grisly picture stuck in her head. Vera wondered what other body parts had dropped from the sky. The phone rang and it was her cousin Arda. Arda said in Armenian, I just heard the worst story. Vera knew she should stop Arda from telling her, but she couldn't. Arda said, my friend Diane told me her cousin was in One World Trade Center when the first plane hit. Everyone in her office ran to the emergency exit. The police ordered them back to their desks so they wouldn't block the stairwells. The firefighters needed the stairs. While she listened, Vera slid the elements of a collage around the paper, a bird, a face, a book, a flower, and some clouds. Arda went on, they all returned to their desks except Diane's cousin. She pretended to follow, but she sneaked to another exit. She was a few blocks away when the towers fell. She thinks she was the only one from her office who survived. That night, after the kids were in bed, Vera recounted both stories to George. She was obsessed by the finger and also by the idea of all those people following orders and ending up dead. She said, I'm afraid I would have gone back to my desk. He said, since when do you do what anyone tells you? And don't worry, I would have been right behind you, pushing you down the stairs. Vera thought about her mother's father, who had decided not to return to his hometown after the First World War. The people who had survived the deportations and returned to Hakopian had held off the Turks for several months in 1920. They butchered them like sheep, her grandfather said. I didn't give them a second chance to murder me. How could you know that it was time to run? How would you have the courage to disobey orders? How would you decide to turn right on the road rather than left? Only later would it become clear that one path had meant survival and the other had led to a mass grave in the desert.
Thank you, Nancy. Can't wait to read your book. Our next guest is Lory Bedikian. Welcome, Lory.
Thank you, Olivia. It's an honor to be here and to be reading with this amazing group and how necessary this organization is. What my bio doesn't say is that my father was from Lebanon, my mother was from Syria, I was born in San Francisco, and my first book really relies heavily on those subjects of being a daughter of immigrants. My newer work, however, deals more with the body, health, illness, and is informed by very recent events, particularly that my mother passed away at the beginning of the pandemic on March 5th, and my father passed away a year and a half before that, and my father-in-law just passed away on New Year's Day. And so it's been you know, God bless humanity. Here I go. I thank Tin House for publishing this poem and giving me a chance. Apology to the body. Sorry for mercury strewn in veins of fish, for traces of carbon monoxide loose in the air, for radiation that circles and enters the aura. Sorry for deliberate puffs and sips late in the night, for an empty stomach burning with coffee grounds. For words of magma, thoughts rough as tufa, scratching the indivisible cells, fragile nerves, divisions of labor and function. For scraping skin until it bled, garnet scars in constellation form. For chemicals bathing in a pool of genetics under viral stars. I'm looking to cleanse regret. I want to give you a balm for lesions, give you evening primrose, milk thistle, turmeric, borage, feet moving toward a language of trees, hands deciphering sediment, steady rhythm back in the pulse. The breathing you knew before you were born. Believe me that we began together, and I will mend each sheath of myelin, reverse the dark that grows behind my eyes. And I'll just read one more poem, and this one is forthcoming in Boulevard. I thank you all for listening, and we'll get through this, whatever this is for all of us. We'll get through it. The tooth is dead. When you hear it, you don't expect to stay so still as if it wasn't the tooth itself, but that someone, not something, was gone. Not obliterated or demolished, but lifelessness had won yet again. You don't expect that word to be used for a molar, a larger part of the mouth's structure. So much use it's given over time, pulverizing animal and vegetable both. They didn't even use that word when your father died. Instead, they told your brother expired, like a driver's license, a parking meter, machines maybe, but not your father. Expired is not good enough to say what's done when he is done. Past, passed away. No, nothing is adequate sound-wise. So dead must have been coined for its monosyllabic, mean, quick consonant D sound to consonant D sound. We can't even say it quick enough to be done with it, because who would want a word that lasts so long? An eon to express such a concept. Even in Armenian, we say merav, which means he, she, it died. Almost beautiful, not too long, softer than dead, first using closed lips. The latter brings the top teeth to the bottom lip as if biting the lip, the act of disbelief. Did someone think of that? That the body should say with the mouth, the word through the act of the mouth should express what death means? Even saying they died, meran, even that sounds like a lovely name of one you met long ago and could never forget, a night where you kept tripping on everything while laughing through sips of cognac. What was this tooth to you anyway? This losing a part of yourself for good almost seems like an insult. You recall those sculptures, gorgeous, Rodin in rain, real and boundless, an ear chipped off from an earthquake, how the ivy twists against the torso while you stare at its imperfections. The sculpture never dies, even if destroyed. And your tooth? And your father? There are moments flung across the galaxies that have their importance rooted in the empty spaces they leave. No sounds good enough to tell you that it's over. The tooth, the mouth, the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Lory, for being here and for having the courage to share your poems with us. Our next guest is JP Petrossian. He will speak about our two events in June dedicated to queer Armenian literature, and then he will read from his own work. Welcome, JP.
Thank you, Olivia. So I serve on the board of directors, and as the founder of the Queer Armenian Library, I am proud to share and affirm IALA's commitment to LGBTQ+ Armenian writers. In terms of representation, a third of the board of directors identify as queer, and IALA has gone so far as to recruit queer Armenian writers to be mentors in its mentorship program. And IALA has committed to creating space for queer Armenian writers to share their work. This June, we will host two events for the US Pride Month. First, a reading of queer Armenian writers, and also a panel that will feature 4 Armenian writers. Those panelists include Arlene Avakian, who wrote the first memoir that was written by both a woman and a lesbian, Nancy Agabian, who wrote the first memoir as a bisexual woman, Michael Barakiva, the first Armenian American to write a young adult novel featuring a gay Armenian hero, and Lee Williams Bedikian, a prolific writer, artist, and filmmaker who arrives at art making as acts of resistance. From there, we are hoping to organize writers from across the world to determine what are the resources that IALA can provide to support queer writers. Please sign up to our newsletter for information about both event dates and opportunities to participate. The essay that I'm going to read for you today is called "Those Words You Can't Find in the Dictionary." I absconded from my grandmother's living room with my grandfather Michel's French Armenian dictionary, a hardback volume with a rusty red linen cover. I had filched it off the side table, carried it behind me to the guest bedroom, opened my frayed black nylon suitcase, and slid the dictionary underneath my boxer briefs. A peculiar intimacy, my grandfather's words wrapped in my underwear. I have no memories of Michel. He died when I was 11 and hadn't seen him. I have photos of various trips to France to visit him and the family. One small square photo is from a June 1984 trip to celebrate my 3rd birthday. He sits in a lawn chair and I splash around in a 2-foot wide enamel wash tub filled with about 6 inches of water. I hold up an empty plastic cup with a curious smile, soaked hair, and browning skin. He sports wide eyeglasses from the 1970s and a tan fedora. He has a square jaw and a well-fed stomach. Mysteries barricade Michel from me. The language barrier, for one. We both came to French as our second language. In 1984, I would have spoken English with a sprinkle of some French vocabulary, and he would have spoken Armenian with proficient French. Miriam claimed Michel was born in Armenia, but my grandmother said Artsakh. He served in the Soviet army during World War II, but how he made it to France is unclear or unspoken, something to do with Nazis. After the war, Michel had made his way to Valence, met my grandmother, married, and had 5 children. He worked at a dry cleaner's. Years later, he told the children that he had had a previous wife and daughter who still lived in Armenia. I do not know if his wife and child attempted to join him in France, and if so, how the Soviet government prevented this, or who convinced whom that Michel should remarry, but they couldn't get out, and he did remarry, and he sent them money for decades. He died the year Armenia declared its independence. A man named Armand bought the dictionary in Paris, and I'm uncertain of Armand's relationship to Michel. The family tree is knotty in the thicket of in-laws. Armand inscribed the book to Michel de Petrossian as a sign of friendship and affection in order to maintain our roots. There was no table of contents, so Michel wrote one in red ink and protected it with clear tape. On the inside cover, he wrote his telephone number in pencil and red ink. He signed the title page, M.D. Petrossian. He underlined dozens of words. Most of them don't seem to suggest anything beyond a man learning a second language. Assidu, constant, débarquer, disembark. He starred the word granit, granite, and I wonder what urgent project had required him to star granite, the only word to receive such importance. Some underlined words did suggest something of his interests, repêcher and hameçon, to fish and fish hook. He underlined glycémie, blood sugar. Diabetes is a prominent risk factor for having a stroke. While hospitalized for one, he caught the infection that took his life. As his queer grandson, I inspected the dictionary to see if he had underlined gay or homosexual, but the Armenian publishers didn't include any of those words, nor did they include bisexuel or transgenre. However, he had underlined perversité and fornicateur. I tried to imagine that maybe he had been bisexual or gay, and that it was his shame who underlined those words, but that thought unnerved me. Would he have tried to stamp out in me what he knew in himself? A crushing thought when you're looking for a grandpa. I can't speak to why Michel even needed the dictionary. By 1984, he must have spoken fluent French. Perhaps Armand's sign of friendship and affection was to gently engage a Michel who still struggled with the language. But Armand also wrote, in order to maintain our roots. Perhaps Michel had started to forget his Armenian. I keep my photo of him in the dictionary. The aesthetic of the picture is coherent, easily describable. A grandfather watching his grandson, golden splashes of sun, a lawn chair, playful smiles, a fedora hat. an aesthetic without the ambiguity of living in France as an Armenian man with Franco-Armenian children and Armenian-American grandchildren who so obviously looked Petrossian, but who visited with him in yet another language to surmount. I imagine him after the photo, returning inside, paging through his dictionary, finding himself surrounded by words and yet mired in indescribability. Those words you can't find in a dictionary.
Thank you, JP, and we hope you can join us in June for our events. I'm next. So here it goes. I'm going to read the opening scene of my historical novel, The Ghost Soldier, about an artistic deception unit in World War II. It begins January 1944 in New York City. Sevan had been invited in. He clutched the letter in his coat pocket as he climbed the stairs and emerged from underground. Columbia University rose like an urban fortress across the street. The school buildings had their backs to the sidewalk, their thick granite bases forming a wall that guarded the university from the masses. He passed through the towering wrought iron gates, taunted by the sweet smoke from roasting chestnuts on the corner. Sunlight on the snow-streaked trees lining the walkway made the campus sparkle, but wind seeped under Sevan's threadbare coat, which his hirik had worn just weeks ago, and he clutched his chest, shielding himself. He was used to being cold, but he didn't want the wind to blow away the scent of cardamom from his father's spiced cigarettes that still clung to the fabric. Sevan had often imagined taking this walk, his black curls pomaded into place, his back straight as he strode down the cobblestone path and entered the registrar's office to choose classes for his first semester. Afterward, he would sit on a bench in the quad and sketch the library, the imperial limestone edifice crowned by a dome. He would pick up books to read so he'd be overly prepared when classes began in the fall. He would treat himself at the soda fountain to a sloppy Joe and a Coke with cherry syrup. He wouldn't feel out of place because, as his hirik used to say, today in America, those at the top of the mountain didn't fall there. Sevan entered the registrar's office. The creak of the door was consumed by the assault of fingers on typewriters. No one looked up. He stood in front of a young man in a three-piece tweed suit, then inched taller, willing his presence to command attention. Finally, the man gave Sevan an appraising glance, making him ashamed to be wearing the coat of the person he held most dear. May I help you? Yes, I'm enrolled in the architecture program for next fall. Sevan slid his acceptance letter across the counter. The man gestured to the bursar's office. Dues are paid there on the left. Sevan dug his thumbnail into his pointer finger. It was a gesture he'd seen his hirik do so often when frustrated with his myrik's old world perspective, but didn't want to yell. His father had never yelled. If you dug hard enough, the pain almost calmed your nerves. Almost. Sevan tried to force the words he'd practiced on the train out of his mouth. I would like to withdraw. The man frowned. Then, with a curt nod, he snatched the letter and returned to his typewriter. His fingers marched ahead on the keyboard as Sevan walked out, descended into the dark subway, and returned to the Bronx, his coat pocket empty. Thank you. Our next speaker is Lola Koundakjian. Welcome, Lola.
Thank you, everyone, for making one of my oldest dreams come true. Thank you, Olivia, especially. I'm going to read a long prose poem, which was published originally in Naugatuck Review, and also is in my third collection, and then a short poem. In search of Rilke at the Metropolitan Museum of Art after a reading of Archaic Torso. A Sunday afternoon, the final lazy weekend of the summer, I escaped to the cool, bright corridors of that art institution. I am in search of Apollo or Rilke. In the Hellenistic and Roman wing, I find Hermes, Eros, Heracles, headless torsos of young men and women, centaurs, athletes, and heroes. I turn around each statue and sepulcher, reading labels and descriptions. In desperation, I ask a guard, but she's clueless. I search for him in a cubiculum nocturnum, that is to say, bedroom, in galleries, in the faces and camera lenses of tourists, finally finding him through old-fashioned help, the humble assistance of the information desk clerk. There are two Apollos here, one in worse shape than the other, one slightly taller, one still resting against a marble trunk, one with more genitals intact, more of the hip areas defined, with both feet, perfect toes, and toenails. The Japanese tourist photographs her friend grabbing, or is it covering, the genitals? I hear the guard laughing heartily. Men, women, and children walk by. Few stop by to look at the headless torso. Few read the description. Few acknowledge that this was Apollo. This was the god of music and poetry, son of Zeus, father of Orpheus, one of the 12 Olympians, dii consentes. Who cares for those lesser gods and heroes when Apollo is in the room? And still, I don't find Rilke, a man at least in some form or manner representing him, his essence, or a man who has read his work, a man aware of that dilemma called mid-career or life crisis. I wonder if I tear a piece of paper, write in bold capital letters Rilke, and hold it up, will someone stop and chat with me, sit and read with me that poem, ask me questions about it, maybe exchange something about himself, a revelation found through this encounter? If any answer to man's inner quest is to be found on earth, it could be at the feet of this statue or another work of art, at this museum or another like it, in this city or another metropolis, such as the many found on this or other continents. And yet, his torso is still suffused with brilliance from inside, like a lamp, in which his gaze, now turned to low, gleams in all its power. And I want to finish with a short Armenian poem, which was translated by Foyle young poet and translator Adam Smart. Այսօր կորձս է թանքարան էր տալ, պարևել հոնաբրող քույները, լույսերն ու շուկերը, մորնալ անցյալը ու երևակայել Avakian. Այսօր կորձս է քիք կարտալ, վերհիշել առօրյան, կյանքը ու հասարակ մարդը, գրել քերթվածներ ու ստեղծել նոր գաղափարներ. Այսօր կորձս է ներգել, չապել ու գիսել թուղթի էջերը, կատարել վրձինին մենաբարը նախքան ջուրին հետ սիրապանությունը, ինքնանկարը, վերացական պատկերը, թիմակը, այսօր կորձս է ստեղծել. Today my job is to go to a museum, to say hello to the colors that live there, the lights and shadows, to forget the past and imagine the future. Today my job is to read a book, to remember the everyday, life and the common man, to write poems and create new ideas. Today my job is to paint, to measure and cut the pages of paper, to carry on the solo dance of the brush before its flirtation with the water, a self-portrait, an abstract picture, a mask. Today, my job is to create. Thank you.
Thank you, Lola. Our next guest is Shahe Mankerian, who will speak about our mentorship program. He is also the author of a forthcoming book, The History of Forgetfulness. Please watch out for that in October. Welcome, Shahe.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shahe Mankerian. I am a poet, the principal of St. Gregory Hovsepian School in Pasadena, California, and now a proud member of the International Armenian Literary Alliance. As a board member, it is my task to oversee the first of its kind summer mentorship program to supporting up-and-coming Armenian writers who use the English language as a source of expression. Personally, I've had the honor of being a mentor and a mentee in my journey as a poet. Yet how I wished at the start of my journey to have had the opportunity to bond or correspond with an established Armenian author. Quoting a fellow board member, J.P. Derbogosian, mentors are the key to writer's success, but finding a mentor who understands Armenian cultural perspectives and the richness and variety of Armenian experiences is rare, end quote. We, the board members of IALA, have recognized the void in our communities, and we hope the summer mentorship program will be the first step in the right direction. So if you're 18 and older, an Armenian who's working on a novel, memoir, creative nonfiction, short story, poetry, or a hybrid of any of those, please visit the website and apply for the mentorship program. The application period is now open and will close on May 31st, 2021. Okay, so the poem I will read is dedicated to my past and present 8th grade students, who I call my mentees. Also, it is dedicated to Aram Saroyan, a mentor, who has taught me how to be concise and compact with my poems. You will hear echoes of Aram's minimal poem Crickets in my poem. It's called How to Cure a Writer's Block for Aram Saroyan. To my students, I say, go outside at midnight and climb the tilted trellis to the roof. Grip the water spout. Keep the finch's nest and the sprout of moss intact. Like Jesus, pretend the ceramic shingles are your Sea of Galilee. Find the chimney and rest your back against the soot of the bricks. Crickets, crickets, crickets. Fix your gaze on the glaze of the black blanketed sky. Tuck yourself in. The full moon will ascend like a chantilly cake. Squint your eyes and take a bite. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahe. And I just want to reiterate that we're really excited to welcome some fantastic mentors to our program, and it's open to mentees of all ages. If you are an aspiring writer and have not published a book, you are more than welcome to apply, and we hope you do. Our next reader is Mashinka Firunts Agabian. Welcome, Mashinka.
Thank you so much. As Olivia said, I'm Mashinka Hakopian. I'm a writer and artist born in Yerevan and residing in Glendale. It's an honor to read today in the company of so many writers I admire, and on what I think is a kind of historic occasion, historic because of the work that IALA is doing. And I think Marine's reading articulated that so beautifully, building transnational bridges with words and bringing together transnational networks of Armenian diasporan writers, bringing visibility to work that's too often rendered invisible. And for that and much else, I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to Olivia, to JP, to Arthur, and everyone who's been involved in bringing IALA together. So thank you. With that, I will launch into my reading. I'm going to read a brief segment from my book manuscript titled Algorithmic Bias Training, or Lectures for Intelligent Machines, which is forthcoming this year from Ex-Artist Books. I'll be reading an excerpt from the introduction, and to offer a few words of context, the project bridges speculative fiction and media theory to imagine a future where artificial intelligences gather for lectures on equity. Let me begin with an anecdote that originated in the Soviet Union. To understand the anecdote, you only need to know that in the Armenian language, the phrase inchkachka is an idiomatic expression for what's new. It translates literally to what is there and what isn't there. The anecdote. After years of research under the cloak of secrecy, a team of computer scientists unveils a supercomputer hailed as the first of its kind. It was designed as an omniscient repository of all the world's knowledge. It can process any request instantaneously, retrieve an answer, and print a response to any query with an accuracy rate of 100%. August experts and renowned technologists inspect the machine. They all agree it represents the most complete extant measure of human knowledge. A saying develops that if something doesn't exist in the supercomputer's data sets, then strictly speaking, it cannot be said to exist at all. News of the curiosity spreads. People travel from distant locales to see the supercomputer, to ask it seemingly unanswerable questions. One day, an Armenian speaker visits. They examine the log of questions the machine has answered to date, and they are decidedly unimpressed. After considering possible queries, the Armenian speaker settles on asking the computer, "How are you?" Or in Armenian, "Inchkachka," what is there and what isn't there. The supercomputer misinterprets this as a request to transmit every data point it's been storing, everything it knows. It starts churning data and works around the clock for hours, then days, then weeks. After printing out endless reams of paper, the computer finally declares the task complete. It has retrieved what amounts to the entirety of the world's knowledge. The Armenian speaker reviews the materials. They are once more unimpressed and dissatisfied. They pose another question. Elinchkachka. Idiomatically, the phrase is equivalent to what else is new, or in literal translation, what else is there and what else isn't there. When it receives this query, the computer, already overtaxed from its weeks-long exertions, glitches and immediately bursts into flames. What does this anecdote tell us? 1, there were no Armenian-speaking computer scientists on the research team. 2, systems don't operate as they should when omissions and biases are encoded in their data sets. 3, world building proceeds by building repositories of knowledge. If agents are involved in a process of producing the world, then what we are asking today is, how can we produce the world otherwise? Thank you.
Thank you, Mashinka. I can't wait to read your book, and please, to the audience members, sign up for our newsletter, and we will let you know of upcoming events featuring new books like Shahe's and Mashinka's. Our next guest is Armine Iknadossian. Welcome, Armine.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to read from an anthology coming out called XLA Poets. It's 10 women poets from LA, from different backgrounds, and I'm really honored to be representing the Lebanese Armenian American poet in LA. This is Resident Alien, a memoir in verse, and this is just the first section that's going to come out in XLA Poets. 1. The Bekaa Valley was a patchwork of orange and olive trees. Time and again, war saw its own becoming. Time and again, a girl was born. During the first trimester, before the sex has mutated into its primal evocation, mother craved sweets and bitters alike, like shafts of moonlight, like tangled bed sheets, like ripped stockings and fault lines. 2. Mother's water broke before Watergate. It became apparent Beirut would have the same fate. Like trying to run underwater, childhood was awkward and slow, but war makes sure to make men out of little girls. 3. The morning after curfew, I sit between my parents while we drive through West Beirut. We need cash for diapers, formula, food. Joy follows death to the back room. They make a baby, call it Beirut. Even in the city of incredulity, Derrida lives in the asphalt. No irony. Men who fear mold more than RPGs, that kind of pathology. Sons and daughters of Khalil. We are called Beirutsis because we live like we die, with eyes wide open. Not like drunken poets, but civilized, like intentional brush fires. My second poem and my last poem is titled Lament. Dead songs lie on the floor, flat like palm leaves. I hold their green hands, weep from my mouth. I was born from women ground into flour in a country with so much solemn wheat. Our loaves are heavy with disaster. We make books from the bread, dip a hand in holy water to sprinkle the last page, keep it wet with worry. Without our songs, who would we be? What will our last page say with its alphabet of blackened teeth? We serve our songs under aspic and sliced lemons so you know what you are about to eat. Maybe the right song will lift the white sheet off our wailing. Here's a song for arthritic hands. All those years, the moon's face, a white sheet. I stand silent in the heat, turning darker like a piece of fruit. Who will hurl their songs to the sky, flat as a failed promise? What will we do now? With so many friends, you cannot count the daggers. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Armine. Our last guest is Arthur Kayzakian. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you everybody for your beautiful work today. We're looking forward to working with you in the future. So I'm going to read one poem in an effort to dismantle the tradition of narratives that center heroes as the main protagonists. I'm going to highlight those that are perceived as villains. This poem is about Darth Vader, the primary antagonist in Star Wars, the Sith from the dark side. So here's the poem, Darth. I shook Darth Vader's hand in England when we were in a department store, and it was cold outside. Fall had desiccated small holiday trees lined up on Kensington. If one could see what a summoning looks like in a season before winter, one could see these branches uprooted like crooked prayers. And my mother, who bludgeoned a crazy man with her purse moments ago in the jewelry section, a crazy man who walked around spitting on everyone, who stopped and pulled my hair and I felt my scalp yank toward the clouds, and my mother who left the house in a panic that morning with keys jangling in her hand, complaining about the rain, the stroke of Big Ben alarming the city of noon. And this mother of mine nudged me towards Darth, who was tall, who was underneath the Death Star colored cape and black boots and humanoid circuitry wired to his chest, his heavy breathing, who smelled of plastic and coffee under his mask, was an ordinary man with an earthly need to drink tea, who spoke a disfluent version of English, part Saxon, part Farsi, part jealous of his partner's boyfriend. And I stood there before Darth in awe of the planetary wars he had vindicated in his need to destroy and conquer solar systems, to swallow asteroids and gas filaments floating in swirls of space. And yet went home and took off his boots and waited for his partner to come home from work, which was usually late, which usually meant smelling like cigarettes and wine. So Darth would reheat his TV dinner and watch Star Trek. And I couldn't speak, but wanted to say, please teach me how to skywalk. But instead, Darth shook my hand and patted me on the head like a good villain should. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And thank you all so much for coming. It was such a treat to hear everyone's work and to share my own work with you. It's been a tough year and a lonely one, and I think that's even more reason to celebrate moments like this when we can come together. I know this will be the first of many such events. I want to thank Lucina Katrandjian for designing our launch poster, and I'd like to extend a special thanks to everyone on our board of directors who worked tirelessly over the past year to make our launch possible, especially JP Petrossian for building our beautiful website. Thank you, JP. Thank you to our advisory board members for their guidance and inspiration. It has really been one of the highlights of my year to get to know all of you and to build such supportive bonds within our community. And thank you all for being here. I hope you will become founding members of our organization or make a donation through our website. Your support will allow us to make sure Armenian stories are heard. Please enjoy the spring. Thank you.